Opportunity often comes in the guise of challenge, and there's nothing more challenging for a writer today than an earnest attempt to master their craft. Beware, O pupil, of searching the words, "How to write a book" online. The writing gurus crowd every digital street corner. The lifestyle hackers find us where we scroll. The 10 Commandments come to us in blog posts on obscure websites. There's a deluge of gurus dispensing unquestionable truths about story. Some of these gurus have earned great acclaim, and rightfully so. Blake Snyder, Chris Fogler, John Truby, Sid Field, Robert McKee, K.M. Weiland. The list continues to grow every day. Some pupils may study at the altar of each and every guru and learn much, yet adherence to the tenets, the rules, and the intellectual principles taught by these gurus results in little more than a sad scholasticism. There is a veritable avalanche of new media adhering to such systems. Literary agents reject manuscripts for lacking a strong 3-act structure. Writing contests eschew any screenplay with a misplaced midpoint. Even readers shrug off books without a palpable character arc. In late capitalism, story is our only religion, and we have swiftly become the foot soldiers of a nascent orthodoxy. This deluge of gurus owes everything to Joseph Campbell, who once wrote, quote, "The gods as icons are not ends in themselves. Their entertaining myths transport the mind and spirit, not up to, but past them, into the yonder void." Joseph Campbell is remembered today chiefly for writing a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and discovering, or inventing depending on your perspective, something called the monomyth, now better known as the hero's journey. Everyone who knows anything about the hero's journey knows that Joseph Campbell discovered it, or invented it, by studying the mythologies and folktales from cultures around the world and discovering their essential similarities. But fewer people know that Joseph Campbell was a card-carrying Jungian. His was a living cosmos. His interest was not chiefly sociological, but psychological and even magical. He was not looking for recurring forms, but recurring themes. He was interested in symbolism, not signifiers. He believed the collective unconscious guided the creation of all myths worthy of the name. Campbell's project was to shed the light of consciousness upon the hitherto unconscious myth-making process at the very moment that it was fading into the far reaches of our collective rearview mirror. His book was never meant to become a writing system, a how-to guide. His book was meant to be an injection of purpose, of meaning, of vision into the veins of a young writer. His book was meant to be a scalpel, slicing through the defenses of the conscious mind, creating a living link between the individual and the collective. He was pointing to yonder void. You really have to hear the melancholy in such passages. There can be no question. The psychological dangers through which earlier generations were guided by the symbols and spiritual exercises of their mythological and religious inheritance, we today must face alone. This is our problem as modern, enlightened individuals for whom all gods and devils have been rationalized out of existence. This is not a man attempting to impart a Confucian wisdom of proper writing, but a man attempting to inject modern life with the divine that it so sorely lacks. Writers today should confer less with gurus and more with the yonder void. Whether we're talking about a 2,000-year-old parable or a blockbuster film streaming today, what makes a myth resonate is not its structure, but its symbolism. The modern pantheon of gods may inspire us to marvel for a day at the dazzling spectacle, but it's those rare stories that contain the power of living archetypes that really remain with us. For the archetypes we encounter in these stories are the very same archetypes that live within our own psyches and populate our dreams. But what exactly is an archetype? The concept of an archetype has a genealogy. Freud, in his early studies of his patients' dreams, discovered recurring motifs, what he initially called archaic remnants. Carl Jung explains how Freud saw these motifs as, quote, mental forms whose presence cannot be explained by anything in the individual's own life, and which seem to be aboriginal, innate, and inherited shapes of the human mind. Jung and Freud both saw the, quote, analogies between the dream pictures of modern man and the products of the primitive mind, its collective images and its mythological motifs. Jung took this concept and ran with it. He compared these mental motifs to, quote, an instinctive trend as marked as the impulse of birds to build nests or ants to form organized colonies. And yet he also claims they, quote, manifest themselves in fantasies and often reveal their presence only by symbolic images. These manifestations are what I call the archetypes. Archetypes, to simplify, are universal, living symbols. But what exactly is a symbol? Jung writes, the sign is always less than the concept it represents, while a symbol always stands for something more than its obvious and immediate meaning. Symbols, moreover, are natural and spontaneous products. No genius has ever sat down with a pen or a brush in his hand and said, now I'm going to invent a symbol. To recapitulate, the stories that resonate with us are not necessarily those that most accurately follow any man-made system, like a 3-act structure, but ones that are injected with the energy of universal, living symbolism. Armed with such knowledge, we should be living through a mythical renaissance. For Jung observes that, quote, we know more about mythological symbolism than did any generation before our own. Yet this fact has a dual impact on us. On the one hand, we have a unique ability to create myths with a high degree of consciousness regarding their purpose and meaning, and on the other hand, we are more alienated from our myth-making, more ironic, more self-aware, and thus skeptical and overfamiliar with them. We seek novelty even as we drown in novelty. We reject all those tired tropes without wondering if those tropes are alive and if they can hear us. Perhaps those tropes only appear tired because they're immortal. Jung, like Campbell, takes these claims at face value. He lives in a divine cosmos. Jung writes, modern man does not understand how much his rationalism has put him at the mercy of the psychic underworld. He has freed himself from superstition, or so he believes. But in the process, he has lost his spiritual values to a positively dangerous degree. His moral and spiritual tradition has disintegrated, and he is now paying the price for this breakup in worldwide disorientation and dissociation. Our storytelling practices become complicit with this dangerous disintegration when we study systems rather than study archetypes. If we are to truly follow Campbell and Jung, our storytelling practices must become a magical praxis. Storytelling, therefore, when it engages with living archetypes and aspires to the status of myth, becomes a sort of psychoanalysis of the commons. This is how you, as a writer, can change the world, not by telling your audience what to think or what to do, but by allowing them to encounter their own psyche, not by representing reality as it truly is, but rather by representing the numinous, the psychological, the archetypal. Now that I've suggested that any man-made writing system is inherently limited, I'd like to advance a new writing system. This one doesn't come from me, nor from any human, really. It comes from a sixth-dimensional entity originating from the planet Venus who calls itself Ra. If you find this hard to believe, I salute you, and yet I urge you to stay with me a moment longer. Ra's teachings come to us in a 5-volume work entitled The Law of One. It's essential reading for any seeker of higher dimensional truths. But my contention is that this book of New Age philosophy also contains a powerful writing system, more malleable than Save the Cat, more meaningful than the writer's journey, more personal than creating character arcs, and more universal than the hero's journey. You likely already know this tool. We call it the Tarot, or more specifically the Major Arcana. There's an ongoing debate regarding the origins of the Tarot. The earliest decks we know come from mid-15th century Europe, but some argue that the cards originate with the Egyptian mysteries. Ra claims that this system of 22 images was devised millions of years ago on Venus with the purpose of familiarizing the initiate with the living archetypes of the collective consciousness unique to our solar system. Now, this is where I might glance around the room to see how everyone's doing with this information, but since I can't see your face, I'll provide citations. Ra says, quote, "We wish not to form that which may be considered by any mind-body-spirit complex to be a complete and infallible series of images. There's a substantial point to be made in this regard. We have been, with the questioner's aid, investigating the concept complexes of the great architecture of the archetypal mind. In no way whatsoever should we, as humble messengers of the one infinite creator, wish to place before the consideration of any mind-body-spirit complex which seeks its evolution the palest hint of the idea that these images are anything but a resource for working in the area of the development of the faith and the will. In other words, take this writing system with a multi-dimensional grain of salt. It's not meant to become a dogma, it merely points to yonder void. The best way to learn this writing system is to simply spend some time with the cards. Find yourself a deck and spread them out before you as you see this spread. Then spend ample time considering each card. Consider each card alone and in its sequence. Remember, there are no answers at the back of the book. Each of these cards reflects back to you an aspect of your own psyche. These cards are mirrors of the deep mind. No insight is without value. Each card in the major arcana is numbered. In Ra's system, the first 7 cards correspond to the mind. The second 7 cards correspond to the body. And the third 7 cards correspond to the spirit. That makes 21. The 22nd card, usually called the Fool, in this system is called the Choice. It stands alone. Each of these 3 rows is split into 7 columns, creating a grid that allows you to see your entire story at a single glance. The first card is called the Matrix. The second is called the Potentiator. The third is called the Catalyst. The fourth is called the Experience. The fifth is called the Significator. The sixth is called the Transformation. The seventh is called the Great Way. The Matrix represents a status quo. It's not static or stagnant, but it's skirted by a limited horizon. For example, card 1, the Magician, or the Matrix of Mind, is meant to represent the conscious, rational mind. It can build things, it can plan for the future, it can trap birds in cages. It's sturdy, like a table. Yet its magic is always grounded in reality. The magician is pointing down to the physical plane. The magician must be potentiated by the unconscious mind, represented by the High Priestess, who reveals the limitations of the magician's horizon. The Matrix is our normal world, and our call to adventure in Campbellian terms is the potentiator. The Catalyst represents transformative encounters with the external world, while the Experience represents the internalization and reflection upon these encounters. In Campbellian jargon, these 2 cards form the Road of Trials and the Ordeal. The Significator represents the mind, body, or spirit most directly. For example, the Hierophant is the classical depiction of the mind itself. It's a figure whose power and influence is drawn from knowledge. At this phase, the hero has passed through their ordeal and has claimed their reward, and yet their journey is not yet complete. The hero has grown, but the horizon is still limited. A further transformation must occur to challenge the Significator's new dogma to expand beyond a final frontier. The final stage of this system, the Great Way, is the hero's apotheosis, the elixir at the end of the journey. In Campbellian jargon, this is the resurrection. You can see how the system easily adapts to a 3-act structure, with each of the rows, mind, body, spirit, corresponding to an act. However, I would caution against such one-size-fits-all pronouncements. The system could also work as a 7-act structure. The beauty of a grid is that it's modular. There's so much space for the individual writer to shuffle these cards, as it were, and to develop their own idiosyncratic relationship to the cards. So for example, perhaps your story has a tower struck down moment near the start. Perhaps that's your inciting incident. Perhaps there's even a scene of a lightning bolt striking a pyramid, as the Potentiator of Spirit depicts. However, placing this scene 16 out of 22 through your story makes no sense if it happens at the start. In that case, perhaps a 7-act structure makes more sense. perhaps for your purposes, instead of having a 3-act structure that goes through the 7 cards of mind, and then the 7 cards of body, and finally arrives at the 7 cards of spirit, you instead move through the matrices first, then the potentiators, then the catalysts, etc. In this alternate system, the magician is still card 1, but justice becomes card 2, the devil becomes card 3, high priestess, instead of being card 2, is 4, the hermit is 5, and so on. In this alternate system, only 4 cards retain their original number. The magician remains card 1, the world remains card 21, the fool or the choice remains card 0, but what I find so interesting is that the card in the middle remains card 11. In this system, that card is strength. In some tarot decks, justice, card 8, and strength, card 11, swap places. It's always good to keep an open mind to other interpretations, but in this case I think it makes more sense to have strength as card 11. The card justice is far more of a matrix, depicting a status quo. This card even holds scales. This is the matrix of body, the body in perfect balance, whereas strength is the paradigmatic experience card, depicting a woman taming a lion, a delicate balance of wills which offers a twist on our initial concept of what strength actually looks like. This card is not about strength of arms, indeed strength of the body, but it's about courage, inner strength, love. This is a perfect card to depict the experience of the body. It's the body transcending itself. And this is the central card of the major arcana. It's literally the center of the grid. And its central symbol, a lion, Leo, a classic symbol for the sun itself, around which all the other cards orbit as planets. And sure, I know there's also a card in here called the sun, but in this case we're talking about the inner sun, a metaphorical sun, the alchemical sun. In other words, no matter how you look at this system, strength, or the experience of the body, remains the midpoint of the hero's journey. What I find so appealing about this system is that the structure is not simply a dead skeleton upon which to fashion your symbols. The structure is itself the symbol. If you're stuck writing, figure out how the cards relate to your story. The cards will show you what's missing. Just as the hero passes out of his normal world and into a special world, so the writer must pass beyond their consciously grasped concepts and systems and enter into the unknown world of the unconscious. Studying these gurus will help, but it can only take you so far. You must delve into the archetypes, become the archetypes. These are not intellectual figures. These are aspects of your own soul. If your story is to resonate with others and be meaningful for a culture, you must pass beyond the individually meaningful into the universally meaningful. Go deep, pupil, then come back and share what you've discovered. If you cannot put your insights into words, but require a narrative or an image or a sound to make sense of them, then you have succeeded. Today, the true hero who returns from their journey with an elixir to heal his riven world is not a warrior. The true hero is the creative individual who can fearlessly confront their own psyche, who can stare down their own demons, and wonder which of the 22 archetypes they represent. The true hero is the lover of the archetypes, who can tame the lion without bodily strength. Even the devil, even death, are but aspects of your shadow. Don't fight them. Integrate them. Greet them. Love them. Go ahead. Leap into yonder void.